This is the Financially Simple Podcast, a show dedicated to destroying the complexities of money for today's small business owner. And now, here's your host, pizza-loving, certified financial planner, Justin Goodbread.
Welcome to Financially Simple. Today we're going to continue dealing with performance management, performance review management. If you remember, we're in a series on how to grow the value of your business, and specifically we're dealing with your team, the people within your operations. In our last episode, we dealt with what is performance management and what are some tidbits or the process to performance management. Today I want to deal with specifically how to conduct a performance review with your team. As I mentioned in our last episode, performance management is a continuous interaction. It goes on nonstop throughout the year. It's part of an ongoing routine. It more than likely is going to morph into or align with your educational programs within your organization. It's ongoing development, for example. You're creating observations as you're watching your team members, and you're providing feedback in small incremental changes. So it's like a real time, like you're watching the movie unfold. That is what performance management is. Now, to the contrary of performance management, a performance review is the formalization process. It's very handy whenever you're dealing with employees. So this is a formalized process. We dealt with this last time about the annual process, having the employee set out their goals, having the employee critique their goals, and having the employee ultimately come down to do a year-end review. And today I want to talk about the actual review process, what's ultimately going to go into their file, into the employee's file. According to the supervisor, on one study I read, performance reviews take too long to write. People only want good news. They say, it's all about show me the money. How can I do the performance review to get me more money? And ultimately, several supervisors argue that it doesn't improve performance. I've actually talked with many business owners. I'm like, how are you doing with your performance review? I'm like, dude, we don't do performance reviews because it doesn't work. So we talked about the process a little bit, and I would dare say that if you listen to our last episode, episode 110, you're going to realize that many people don't actually do performance management. And if they're not doing performance management, I would agree. Performance reviews just typically don't work. Now, the employee says, I never get a performance review, or it's always late. They'll say, all check marks and no examples. So they just sit down there with the supervisor or the business owner, and the business owner just puts checks, and they don't explain what they're actually looking for. They don't explain the game or the rule book. Remember one of my tips, the 7 tips last time I said, hey, know the rules. It's one of the biggest complaints from employees. They don't know what they're being judged on. There's no guidance, is what they say. There's often no guidance about what to do differently. Well, you're telling me I'm not doing very good, but how can I improve? I don't understand what you want. You know, that's probably one of the weakest things that I deal with personally is I am not very good at explaining my expectations. It's a weakness that I have. I'm not very good at explaining my expectations. I make the assumption, and we all know that assumption makes an ass out of you and me. So what the ASSUME stands for. I know that the assumption is I expect people to understand what I mean. And I dare say that if you're a business owner and you're pulled as many different directions as I do, that we often fall guilty of this. We don't provide guidance. And they'll often say there's no direct link between performance and pay, between performance and compensation. I'm struggling right now whether or not I'm going to have an episode on how to conduct compensation reviews or how we build bonus structure. I've been thinking about that a lot. I've had a lot of questions come through. Hey, by the way, I get a lot of questions on Twitter. People say at Justin Goodbread, and they'll ask me a question. I've had a few come in from Instagram, which I thought was interesting. My Instagram account is mostly just my life. That's me sharing photos about what I see. Take a look there. I've had a lot of questions come in through Facebook and LinkedIn. I even had a couple of questions come in from Pinterest. So I give you those because if you see something out there and you've connected with me on one of those channels, shoot me a message. Just say, hey, Justin, what do you think about this? I'm actually building a series of questions that we're going to do a podcast series on the top questions that I'm asked. So let's answer the question, why do we even conduct performance reviews? There's a couple of points that I jotted down. Number one, it gives opportunity for formal written feedback and dialogue about development. So it gives an opportunity for the manager or the business owner to formally sit down and tell somebody what they're doing good and what they're doing bad. It also emphasizes or builds a performance culture. We talked about culture. Doing performance reviews will make a culture go from this is just another job to now I'm bought in and I'm plugged in with this organization. It's one of the great things. It reinforces expectation amongst the team members, and it recognizes achievement. So let's say you have two salespersons or salespeople within your organization. Both salespeople are expected to reach the same result. It gives you the ability to reinforce the particular good behaviors, bad behaviors you want to see, but it also allows you to recognize the achievement of those people who are doing the best sales process or following the sales process, the best results. Another thing it does is it generates documentation and a record. As a boss, there's many things we're looking for. One of those things is how can we create our businesses and reduce liability? We're going to talk about legal at some point, but doing performance reviews allows you to document what is happening amongst employees. Obviously, you're going to be documenting complaints, you're going to be documenting exodus, and you're going to be documenting a lot of other things. But a performance review allows you to document, especially when it comes to termination issues, why you might be terminating somebody. There's different state laws, et cetera, and which goes to my last one. It justifies your employment decision. So if you need to terminate somebody, then you can make that decision. You can justify it to perhaps, if you're a mid-level manager, you can justify why you're having to terminate somebody to the ultimate executive in that particular case. So there are many reasons to conduct them, but performance reviews should clearly explain to the employee what is in it for them, why it's important, and how they're doing. Those three things. What's in it for the employee? If they hit this performance, what do they get? Why is it important they do it? Many times people will say, well, just do it because. I mean, we've all said that as parents. Our kids will go, well, why, Daddy? Well, because I said so. Well, that doesn't work in the corporate world too many times. It doesn't work in many jobs. I can remember in our landscape business, I had our team members hand dig a ditch. Now, I got out there with them on a shovel, but we had to hand dig a ditch a couple of 100 yards long. And in that South Georgia sun, let me tell you, it was hot. We had a piece of equipment there and everybody's going, why? Well, the reason why is because the ditch was going to overlay multiple times and cross a piece of fiber optic cable and a bunch of other different utilities. And it was less risk to hand dig the ditch. Well, once I explained that to the team, okay, then we all got in there and we busted it out and we got the ditch dug. Same thing's applicable in your world. And the third thing a performance review has to deal with it has to tell them how they're doing. So why do you conduct performance reviews? Because it reinforces your expectations. It reinforces your expectations. It tells you how you want your company to operate, and it also tells the employees what you're expecting from them. So as I mentioned earlier, in a performance management, like I said, it's continuously interaction. It's ongoing. We talked about that last episode. It's part of the everyday routine, and you're constantly trying to teach and develop your employees, bring it extra job skills, etc. Whereas a performance review is a singular meeting. It's a formalized meeting that happens typically 2 times a year. That's how I like to conduct ours. It's a dedicated time. Everything stops. Nothing is interacting. You're not going to get sidetracked. It's part of a development plan. It goes into your employee training program. It summarizes the actual results of the employee's task against the expectations that you were expecting the employee to achieve. And ultimately, it's going to document all the events. It's going to document everything that occurred during that 6-month time period. Now, some people say, well, I like to do performance reviews annually. I just think that stretches too far in between. My personal opinion, I watch businesses who do things more frequently, and it seems to me those who do performance reviews, every 3 months or every 6 months, they seem to have a little bit better results when it comes to employee engagement. So remember, the purpose of performance reviews is that engagement. That's the ultimate job. You're giving feedback and you're receiving feedback. And it's a two-way street. It's not coming strictly from the manager to the employee. It's also going from the employee to the manager. And so the whole purpose of the performance review, the formal performance review meeting, is for engagement. I want to give you a little insight into how you should prepare for the session. how you should prepare for the session. I read something from John Dillinger. It said that before you go rob your first bank, knock off a couple of gas stations. Okay. It makes a lot of sense. Before you jump into the actual formal evaluation, the performance review session, or whatever you want to call it, before you jump to that formal one, let's do some things in advance. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to schedule the performance review far enough in advance. We're going to schedule it. It's not going to be, hey, we're going to have a performance review tomorrow at so-and-so. No, you're going to put it on the calendar. You're going to let your team member know formally. Maybe you're not in an office environment. You're out like the guy, he's a client of mine. He's, I'm just an old ditch digger. Maybe you're a ditch digger, as he calls himself. And there's not really a formal office. You can give a handout to everybody and let them know when you're going to actually do a performance review. And you're going to allow about 15 to 45 minutes for time. It's not going to be a quickie, guys. It's not just going to be, I'm going to come in and just say a couple of things and we're done. Or this is just haphazard. No, you have to make it intentional. This has to be intentional. You're going to review your comments. Now remember, as we talked about the process last episode, this is an ongoing 7-step process, if not more, depending on your particular business. You should know by the time it comes down to where you're actually scheduling the review, you should know what you need to communicate to the team member, whoever you're going to be reviewing. So you're going to review your comments and your notes. You're going to have examples of how they can improve. And you may even have to have samples. You may even have to have outlines. You're going to do everything you can to communicate. I use a lot of examples. I use football. I use hunting. I use gardening. I use lots of examples because it helps me to communicate very complex strategies. I was actually reading in the Bible, Jesus used parables. Jesus used parables because it gave him the ability to communicate very complicated things to everybody so they can understand it. You have to do the same thing. Now, by no means am I telling you you're Jesus. Okay, don't jump out there and say, dude, Justin just told me I'm Jesus. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm getting at is you have to have examples. You're going to have ideas. You're going to have ideas for those adjustments is what I'm getting at. Let's say that somebody is not hitting a particular mark and you've tried. Now you're going to give them some examples of what you want and you're going to give them some ideas on how to accomplish it. And one of the things I found, and whenever I'd had to do multiple performance reviews, is you always start with your best performers. It's just my opinion. It's easy to deal with your superstars. It's easy. So when you're doing performance assessment, start with the superstars first. By starting with the superstars, it gives you the ability to hone your skills. It gives you the ability to craft your time, your mind, your process in that particular meeting. So that is preparing for the session.
You are listening to Financially Simple, destroying the complexities of money for today's small business owner.
Now, when the actual performance review comes apart, let's put a couple of tips out here for you. The first thing you're going to do is you're not going to have any interruptions. Phones are off. People are blocked out. If you're in an office environment, no one can interrupt. If you're on the job site, you're going somewhere to where you have dedicated time. You have dedicated, uninterrupted abilities. You're going to open with just a basic pleasant atmosphere. I mean, this is just basic knowledge. Remember the Oreo effect? You're going to open. It's going to be kind. How's the family? How are you doing? Remember the old saying, people will never forget the way they made them feel. I know this saying, I butcher it every time. Someone tweeted me and was like, Justin, dude, you butcher this statement all the time. This is how it goes, and I still probably just butchered it. But you're going to open in a pleasant atmosphere. No one wants to walk into a hostile environment, even if you're going to terminate somebody. We've all had to do that, and it's not fun for anybody involved. But even if you have to terminate somebody, folks, these are human beings. These are our brothers and sisters. You're like, Justin, they're not my brother and sister. Look, we're all of one race eventually. Love on people. Be kind. Man, I get so tired of people beating down other people. So you're going to open up a pleasant environment. Then you're going to explain the purpose of the meeting, the process, and how it's a mutual assessment. Now, go back to our podcast last time. In every one of the meetings, you're going to allow the employee to do their assessment first. So you're going to ask this self-assessment. You can ask the question, hey, what are you most excited about? What do you think that you just knocked out of the park this year? Why do you think it made a difference? What did you learn this year? You're going to ask open-ended questions and allow the team member to do self-assess. You may even get down to, do you think you could have made some improvements this year? Now remember, the informal process, as we talked about last episode, is going to be ongoing. It should not be of any surprise the questions you're going to ask this team member. Now, where it gets difficult is whenever you go into your appraisal or your particular assessment of that employee's behavior. This is where it can get delicate, especially if you have an employee who's just not where they need to be. So you're going to go through and you're going to explain each rating that you're giving, and you're going to provide examples. You're going to look at areas of agreement, and you're going to look at areas that you disagree, and you're going to document it. So Sally, I use Sally a lot. I use Bob or Sally or whoever it is. It doesn't matter. Let's say Sally's coming in and Sally says, I've had an excellent year this year. I did this, that, and the other, and it's all positive. Well, that would tell me they're probably an I personality, like we talked about a while back, but they're all positive. They're extreme optimists. Nothing they did was negative. However, you view things differently, and you've been telling Sally all year, Sally, we're really missing the boat on this, and here are the 5 or 6 things we can do to improve, and here's what I'm expecting from you. And Sally's totally underperformed. That's where it's going to get difficult, because you want to document all those things. And then you're going to ask Sally, does she agree or not? And you're going to document why she does or does not agree. Ultimately, you're going to develop a process, and it may be a process that helps them reach this new expectation. It may be a process that either moves them along or moves them out of the business, or maybe a process that's up for immediate termination. And like I said, we've all dealt with that. It's not fun. But you're going to develop a process in that meeting. Hopefully, if you've been doing the performance management properly with your team members the entire year, then you're not having to go into this appraisal session, this final employee evaluation session. You're not having to go there and tell the employee that they just are awful. No one wants to hear that. Least of all me. I get my feelings hurt. I go suck my thumb, sit in a corner, and start crying somewhere. Not really, but yeah, I kind of do. Anyways. So whenever you're conducting the sessions, I go back to the Oreo approach. You've got to start off with the sweetness. You've got to be very firm, very meticulous, very forthright in what you're trying to accomplish. And you're going to finish up with, here's how we're going to accomplish this. Or it's now not the time, it's now time to move on. And we've all been in those things. So go back to the process here. The review meeting is going to be when your team member arrives, you want them to arrive open-minded. You don't want them to be defensive. You want the team member to do a self-assessment. The supervisor is going to give a review of the self-assessment. The team member and the supervisor are going to agree or disagree on what the self-assessments are. And ultimately, the supervisor is going to summarize the core message. They're going to summarize the main point, the next action steps that the team member has to accomplish. And then at that point, the meeting is completed. Now, one of the keys that you have to do going into this is, as I mentioned, you want to be descriptive. You want to have goals and expectations. You want to have behavioral competencies, and you want to have all sorts of high-level performance overall comments. Those are vital. All 3 of those are vital. And ultimately, you're going to rank. Now, I've seen ranking where people say an A, B, C, D. I've seen people say a platinum, gold, silver, bronze. I've seen terms like top, value, developing. I've seen sufficient, insufficient, delinquent. Whatever your terms are, the way I like to think about it is, if they're of an excellent performance level, it means you're going to grade them as they're exceeding expectations in most of the job performance. It goes above and beyond. So they're way past the call of duty that you've hired them for. They're thinking proactively. They're taking ownership in the position. That's an excellent rating. That would be a platinum rating. So now you've done the performance review and you're like, man, this guy, gal's really good. I think they have a platinum rating, whatever the term is you want to use. Another rating might be a gold rating, which means they met all their expectations. They met them all. And they sometimes go above and beyond what's asked. They're not just looking at the clock at 5 o'clock every day trying to run out. They're taking initiatives. They're solving problems. They just don't have that extra spunk as that top performer does. So they're a good, solid core employee. That's awesome. Congratulations. I wish I had an army of those in addition to the army we already have. You may get into some problems, though. You may get into that silver or that C-level employee, whatever term you want to use. And this is some that's, they're hitting some of their goals. They need a little bit more training maybe, or, they're average. The performance is not meeting the expectation of the manager, but it's kind of meeting the expectation of the employee. Yeah, those are the types that, hopefully you're going to replace that type of personality in about 3 to 5 years, if not sooner. Ultimately, though, you may have the individual that's just an F-rated. That's just, they fail regularly. They just don't meet any of their expectations. They just stop. They don't have the knowledge or they don't have the skill set to accomplish what you ask them to accomplish. And they don't change. when they need to advise. I can never forget the time Dave Ramsey, which I didn't agree with him, but it burned in my head in the way he operates. He would snap his fingers and say, change, and expect the person to do it without explaining how to change. I thought it was ludicrous, but sometimes maybe you've explained how to change and the team member just doesn't get it. That's the hard decision. I'm going to tell you the rule of 80-20. Whenever you're dealing with team members, especially in today's environment, you want to have top performing team members. The better the performance, the better the company. The better the company, the better their sales price, the better the value. And the whole idea behind performance valuations is to find out which team members are performing at the level which will create the greatest possible value for your company. Top performers bring higher value. Just the way it goes. So the core message is this. Remember this. People never remember what they're told. They only remember what they're told they did wrong. So as you go through this performance assessment, you have to cookie it. You have to go through with the clear goals, the expectations, couple it with the process that we outlined in episode 110, and ultimately place the employee in a position where it's a leg up, a step up, a hand up, to where they can flourish within your organization. And if they can't, it's time to cut. As we say, it's time to fish or cut bait. It's time to cut bait in that scenario. It's not time to fish. It's time to move an employee out who's not going to meet your expectations. And with that, folks, I'm going to sign off on this particular episode number 111 in the books. Hey, look, our newsletter is rocking. I think we're broke like 3,000, 4,000. I don't know. They tell me so many numbers. We got a lot of folks who read our newsletters, and I'm getting all sorts of questions. If you have a question, you can email me at justin@financiallysimple.com. Just say, put a question inside there. Or you can connect with me on social media. I'm on all the social media channels. I had a question come from a listener this last week that I'm working on, trying to figure out how I'm going to put it into a podcast. It was a really good question. I've got to figure out where to fit it in. But I answered the question for this listener. If you listen to this on iTunes, would you do me a favor and leave a review? That's the way the show moves up in the rankings. For a while there, we were leading number one in all of Europe, believe it or not. It was pretty amazing to see the iTunes rankings. So we have a lot of our comrades, business owners across the pond who are listening to the show. And I want to thank you guys over there in England, Europe, different places around that area of the country. Just want to thank you for listening to us, even abroad. We have some folks in Australia and South America. So it's pretty amazing to see who all is listening to this type of business advice. Hey, look, I know I say it every week, but it's true. Life is hard, life is good, and life can be frustrating. It can. Money doesn't have to be. Let's continue to make our lives at least financially simple. Y'all go out and make it a great day.
You have been listening to the Financially Simple podcast. The information in this show is for informational purposes only. This show is not investment advice. Instead, seek help from a competent financial advisor. Justin Goodbread, CFP, is an investment advisor representative of Heritage Investors, a registered investment advisor.